Kiki's Delivery Service. This is one of the best known and loved animated films by Hayao Miyazaki. Produced in 1989 and released in English in 1998 and 2010, it stars Kirsten Dunst as Kiki and Phil Hartman as her cat Gigi. I actually think that there should be more of a push for fans to identify with the Studio Ghibli cast of female protagonists. Princess Mononoke, Nausicaa, Kiki, Ponyo, Chihiro from Spirited Away, among their other characters. Ghibli's female characters tend to be innocent and clever, never cruel, and are normally around the same age as their intended audience. The characters don't always act with the graceful, mature femininity of the Disney princesses, and never act spastic like the current incarnations from Tangled and Frozen. Disney actually owns the U.S. rights to Kiki's Delivery Service and made changes to the script that I'll touch upon in a moment. Kiki is a young witch, off on her way to learn how to make it on her own at the age of only 13. Which I guess must be normal for a witch. She travels with Gigi to a harbor town where she starts up her own business, as the title suggests, in deliveries, using her broom to fly around the city. But all the flying causes her to overload her magical powers. This story actually made me sad because Phil Hartman is delightful as Gigi, but even after Kiki gets her magic back, she doesn't seem able to understand what he says anymore. That hurts because I really liked Gigi and Hartman played him superbly for effect. However, Miyazaki explained that Gigi represented the immature side of Kiki, and that since she is grown up, doesn't need to talk to him anymore. For the 1998 Disney adaptation, they added a line that made it seem like Gigi and Kiki could still communicate, but for the 2010 version, which I saw, that line was removed. On the plus side, additional lines by Hartman were added in. The film is full of beautiful animation, excellent acting from the cast, and minimal music. Kiki is a positive role model for children in that she isn't mean, and there aren't really antagonists as much as just problems for her to solve as she grows up. One of the great things about a film without an antagonist is that the struggle with the self is better realized, and this sets kids up to understand some of the hardest parts about growing up. A live-action revamp of the film is set to be released in Japan in 2014, and a musical version was also released in 1993. I enjoyed this film immensely, and with a shorter runtime than a lot of later Miyazaki films, I think it will be a lot of fun for you too. Kiki's Delivery Service gets a 4.5 out of 5. The Flying Machine. Released in 2011, this film stars Heather Graham and pianist Lang Lang. The film essentially exists in two parts, and it's a little difficult to negotiate the relationship between the two. We're given the framing context of the primary story, which is focused on in the second part. Heather Graham plays a mom, I guess a single mother, named Georgie, who's preoccupied trying to get a loan for a house she's dreamed of. I guess that her daughter plays the piano and they're going to a show in London where Lang Lang is going to play accompaniment to an animated film, with music by Chopin. The animated silent film is called The Magic Piano, and is a bit of meta-theater. The show carries a lesson about the importance for children to be with their parents, as a father loses his shop in Warsaw and has to go to London for work, while the daughter stays with a relative and her obnoxious son. The son enjoys dressing like a vampire and pesters the girl until she storms out and goes out behind the apartment to a courtyard, where a pile of old musical instruments lies derelict. The boy tries to apologize to her after trying to suggest that he and the mother take her to London. Both the children are in the courtyard wishing that she could be reunited with her father, when the various piles of instruments assemble themselves into an amazing flying machine, with wings like the leaves of a flower. The machine can have the course set to Paris, Vienna, Warsaw, and London, among many others around Europe. The girl and the boy fly to Vienna and Paris, and eventually to London, where they see her father. But they aren't able to land, and it turns out that the machine was all just a dream. But when the girl looks through the telescope that she dreamed was on the machine, she sees her dad coming back for her. That's where our meta-story ends. But the rest of the story revolves around the mother being so caught up in the deal to buy her home that she lets the kids wander off to get an autograph. When she can't find her kids, Lang Lang says something vague as the telescope from the movie appears on the piano. She looks through it and is suddenly aboard the piano, flying through the air after her kids, who are on the flying machine from the movie. They cite some facts about Chopin as they visit some sites, and we find out that Georgie used to be a dancer. But in the end, this is a wholly unsatisfying film, simply because we end up with a rather unsatisfying resolution to the plot of the kids being in Vienna for no apparent reason and then being turned into statues somehow at the Chopin monument. And she has to dance to set them free. 2 out of 5, and that's being generous. The Indian in the Cupboard. Released in 1995, this film got a lot of praise from critics and viewers alike. I remember that at the time I was interested more in seeing something with action, and I was out of school sick. And to my shame, I went to see the first Power Rangers movie instead, which was so badly written and acted that I haven't forgiven myself for missing out on the Indian in the Cupboard. I actually waited until now, over 15 years later, to sit down and watch it. Mark that off my bucket list, and boy, was it worth the wait. The special effects are seamless, and the story is full of twists and turns, without really knowing how it's going to end. Scenes have a flowing narrative, but with subtleties that everyone will enjoy. Special effects aren't used in this story to simply bedazzle the viewer, but rather to further the plot. I have to give credit to Frank Oz for his excellent direction. Our story centers around 9-year-old Henri, who receives a cupboard for his birthday, among the regular array of gifts. It's a very plain cupboard, and as it turns out, a key that his mother collected from when she was little happens to fit the lock perfectly. Thinking nothing of it, he puts a plastic toy Iroquois in the cupboard, and when he unlocks it, the toy has come to life. It turns out that the Iroquois is named Little Bear, and he has a whole history. It seems that the cupboard actually takes real people from history and puts them into this world in the same size as the toy. I'm not sure what this means later when Henri puts dolls of Darth Vader and RoboCop in, and they too come to life. Presumably they just become like the characters from the films. But Henri quickly learns a lesson when he uses a doll of an older Mohawk to get Little Bear a bow, when the Mohawk suffers a heart attack and dies. Henri learns that bringing things to life is a responsibility. There's no harm in using a toy of an object, although we should be glad that he doesn't seem to have toy guns or knives. I say that because Henri's older brothers break into his room and won't leave. Like older siblings do, they don't respect their younger sibling. So Henri kicks their rat, who lives in a ball, down some stairs. Now, I'm sure that it was all special effects, since there's no need to accidentally harm the rat. Henri's friend, Patrick, an Asian Indian boy, is told about the cupboard, and doesn't believe him. Even though he says not to, Patrick brings a cowboy to life. Now, this is where I'm going to get philosophical, because it seems like these things are emblematic of the characters. The older brothers are caught up in their own world and don't care much about others, just looking out for themselves, similar to a rat in a ball. Patrick doesn't really listen to others or care about the repercussions of his actions, much like a cowboy who had more courage than sense. Henri is curious but downtrodden and tries to live in his world peacefully. I wouldn't presume to say that this is emblematic of all Native Americans, but he and Little Bear do have a lot in common in this way. Little Bear teaches Henri to be brave, self-reliant, and to show reverence for others. and over the course of the story, we come to see that Little Bear has been like a father to Henri for the time that they've been together. I liked the premise of this story because it didn't feature a child whose parents were widowed, divorced, or dead, as so many of these children's films do, and not all the plot points get resolved, much as things in life don't. A bully who takes Henri's money doesn't get his comeuppance, nor do the older brothers get theirs. Henri doesn't grow closer to his parents or to his friend Patrick. The boys do grow wiser from what happened, but you can make up the rest of the story for what happens. I have to give Oz credit for casting children close to the age of the character. So often in Hollywood we get actors who are older, or worse still, who act older than the character should. These 9-year-olds act like 9-year-olds. They have 9-year-old voices and ways of thinking appropriate to their ages. The film is based on a book of the same name with several sequels. That said, I'm sorry that they didn't make the sequel novels into films either. But at the same time, there's something to be said for leaving a book as just a book. The filmmaking process is so intensive that it's not needed to make a series out of every novel. What's more, details get left out. As it stands, The Indian in the Cupboard is a story that can stand alone, without needing sequels or prequels to expand upon it. And if you find yourself wanting to find out what else happens, read the book for story time at a local library. The Indian in the Cupboard gets a well-deserved 5 out of 5.